In this video, we're going to discuss some of the important need to know for interface customers related to patient and scheduling. Practice Suite has both one-directional and bi-directional integration with various external clinical and diagnostic systems. Based on your integration type, there is some info that you need to know. Generally, when it is one-directional, the data flow is going to be from another source system, which would be a clinical or diagnostic system, coming into Practice Suite. That would mean the patient appointments or charges will flow from the source system to Practice Suite, but not the other way around. If it is bidirectional interface, patients, and in some integrations, even appointments would flow between the two systems, both ways, syncing the data between the systems. However, in both type of integrations, whether single or bidirectional, the charge data will always flow one side, that is from the source system to Practice Suite. Now let's look at the information that you would need to know regarding both types of integrations. Firstly, let me take you to the patient screen. On the patient screen, I'm just going to open up one of the patients here. On the patient screen, always look for the PC reference number field. Though this is an editable field and refers to patient chart reference number, which is a manual chart number that you can enter, or a record number for a patient that you can enter here. But for any integration customers, any customers where the patients come over an interface, this PC ref number is always going to be the external system's patient ID or medical record number. So that's one important information for you to know. If you want to reference this patient in the other system, in the source system, you can look for this PC reference number field. It's always going to be the ID number of that external system. The next thing you need to know about bidirectional interfaces is that if you have a bidirectional integration, for the data to sync back to the external system, you have to hit the save to have that synced back. So if you make any changes on the patient screen, there is a save, the green save button on the main patient screen. You need to hit that save to have the data flow back into the external system. Now, there are save buttons other places too. For example, if I go to this insurance screen, you may make changes to the insurance and hit save. Now that does not trigger the sync back to the external system. The sync back to the external system is triggered only when you hit the save on the main patient screen. So always remember, once you make any changes on any of those screens or any screens in here or any options in here, you have to hit the save on the main patient screen to have that synced back. The other thing about the integration that you need to know is that the level of information that transfers between the two systems. Now, for a bidirectional interface, it is only the basic patient demographics data that gets transferred to the other system. So, though you might have so many other options here, not all of these information gets transferred. Only the basic patient demographics information will transfer or sync back between the two systems. Also, you may add patient alerts or patient notes. These information will also not sync between the two systems. It's only the basic demographics that get synced. Next is about merging patients. When you merge a patient in Practice Suite, or you merge the patient in the external system, at the moment, that merge does not sync between the two systems. So that means that once you do the merge in Practice Suite, you would also have to do the merge in the other system. And the step has to be manually done. Merging in Practice Suite or in the other system will not merge the patient in the external system. So either places, you would have to do the merge manually. And also note that when you do the merge, always merge in the same order as you merge in the one system. So the one system that the ordering you merge should be the same order that you merge in the other system too. Next, we're going to look at some other additional need-to-know information. So there is a patient ID that syncs between or is used for referencing the patients between the two systems. Similar to that, for every setup that transfers over, like for example, provider information that transfers over, or service location, or even referring provider, each of them have a field for code that is used for mapping between the two systems. Now, one important thing about the integrations is that some setups, or most setups, don't transfer or do not get added through the interface, which means that you would have to manually have them set up in the two systems. So for example, providers have to be added in both the systems manually. So this provider has to be added in Practice Suite system and would also have to be there in the other system, the external system, for the mapping to happen. The providers do not get added from the integration. So if you have a provider in the external system but don't have that provider in Practice Suite, then that sync or that the information will not transfer over. So you might see charge failures or appointment failures if the provider is missing in one of the systems, especially for bi-directional integrations, but also for single one-directional integrations too. The provider that's on the source system should also be there in Practice Suite. And the way the providers are mapped using this code field. So there's a provider ID in the external system, which will have to be entered in the code field in here. Similar to this provider mapping, there is also mappings for referring provider and service location, and also for the insurance company. So if you go under the insurance company screen, and I'll open an insurance, you can see there's another external ID field. This is typically going to be a carrier ID on the external system, or an insurance ID in the external system. So when an insurance company gets created over the interface into Practice Suite, it would add this external ID, this reference ID would be added into this other external ID field. That's how the system knows, or the interface knows, the next time this insurance comes over, again, for another patient, the system knows that this insurance is already there in here, and so it just maps onto the same insurance. The same kind of code is also there in the service location screen. So if you go open the service location, you can see there is that code field, and this is again used for mapping. This field is used for mapping between the source system or the other system and Practice Suite. In many of the integrations, we have service locations added through the API. So sometimes you might also see the service location is not added in Practice Suite. It still gets added over the interface. Now, if you don't see the service location add, or it fails, or it shows the service location is not present when the charge comes over, then you have to make sure that the service location is added and that same ID number, or that location with that ID number, is added. Similar to the service location, you also have the same for the referring provider. So if you have referring provider coming over the interface, you also can see that the referring provider also has a code field. And so this code also has to be the same that's the ID number for this referring provider in the other system. So these are some of the setup need to know, which you would need to know. Out of this, the referring provider, the service location, and the insurance company may get added through the API. In some integrations, as I was mentioning, the service locations may not add, and you may have to add them manually. Also, the providers or any of the other setups that you see in Practice Suite, they will not get added through the interface. They all have to be added separately, whether it's the practice information or whether it's the provider information or the fee schedules. These all have to be added separately. So we have looked at all the patient and some of the important setups that you need to know. Next, let's go to the scheduler, the appointment scheduler, and look at what is needed for that sync to happen successfully. So on the scheduler, the most important thing here is the appointment status. Any integrations where the appointments are getting synced, you need to make sure that the status in Practice Suite or the status in the external system matches the status in Practice Suite. If there are statuses in the external system that's not in Practice Suite, the sync will not work. Those appointments will not get synced, and vice versa too for bidirectional. If their appointment status is not present in Practice Suite, or the appointment status is not present in the external system, the sync will not work correctly. Both statuses the statuses in both systems have to match each other. Also, another note regarding the appointments are the blocks, the provider blocks or the practice level blocks also don't get synced over. So you may have a block here, which is break. This break block will not be synced over to the external system. They have to be manually added in both places. So that was all the need to know information regarding the integration customers, both for bidirectional and single direction.